when they weren't rigid categories.
So there were leaders who were trying
There were leaders that were trying to come back and revive some of that stuff that didn't really exist among the people themselves. They might or might not, you know, claim one or the other, but I don't think it was as rigid. And I think one of the differences there as well is that everybody was mixed. So it wasn't like you have a Hutu village and then a Tutsi village and then a Hutu village and then a Tutsi village. It was your neighbors, it was the people down the street. We're, in that sense, in our country, I think we're much more segregated in a lot of ways than I experienced in Rwanda. We tend to divide by socioeconomics and by race, and we, you know, we have our enclaves by national and ethnicity, okay? You know, San Francisco has Chinatown, and, you know, that sort of thing. And that's not the way it existed, as I understand it, between the Hutus and the Tutsis.
You can make it, you can err in either direction when you get into excess. Like right now, my concern is that there's this rigid, in Rwanda, you can't even say Tutsi and Hutu. I mean, it's been made illegal. Well, that doesn't, I mean, that's a setup for a problem too. You know, what about somewhere in the middle?
Well, I can envision a national form of healing if those divisions have been dropped. But if they're out there and could be reactivated so that there's always this feeling of threat in the future, how do you get beyond that? And that's my question, is a national reality. Are they getting beyond that as a nation, not just these people you're working with?
And it's hard, I don't really know because I think it's below the surface.
Officially they're past it. You don't have ID cards, for example, that identify you. You're not allowed to be identified according to that. But whether people hold that internally, whether mom and dad say to their kids, remember that you are, I don't know. We didn't have that level of conversation with people.
Well, a level of comfort would come out of a national sense of healing and forgiving, whereas it might not.
If that's still there.
If the environment were still, if the pot were still on the burner.
I am not a historian, I gotta really say that, but my understanding of part of what led up to World War II is that the same thing existed after World War I. You know, you keep hanging on to the old hurts, and all it takes is someone to kind of revive it and get it stirred up a little bit again, and it's all alive and well, and kicks right in again.
And what we tried to offer was a process for dialogue. Process to be able to talk.
I guess that goes back to, given the enormity, given that you have 2 weeks, given that it's a different culture, what do you decide is a reasonable chunk to have? I don't understand well enough what the program was.
We did not do therapy, we trained them.
Okay.
And so our desire is to train them sufficiently that they can then make use of this model on an ongoing basis. Now, we did it with an awareness that not only were they the potential helpers in the healing process, they were also survivors themselves. So we encouraged them to listen on two levels. One, how does this apply to you personally? And beyond that, how can, if you integrate it into your own healing, how can you then use it with other people?
And who were the people that we
were working with?
Yeah.
The first work we worked for 5 days with priests, and this is a very Christian culture. I think it's like 90% Christian and 60% of the Christian are Catholic. I've read different statistics, but that gets you in the ballpark. So, and we were training the priests of one diocese, so it's a beginning. And then the second week we were working with medical people and educators of that diocese, most of them from Catholic institutions.
So what we really did was a concentrated effort in one geographic locale where different leaders in different areas, different constituencies now all have the same vocabulary to begin to dialogue and work with one another and reinforce one another. So for instance, the clergy aren't trained therapists, so we're not asking them to start small therapy groups, but they can begin to teach those skills by when they're preaching, when they're doing the individual coming to meet with them, when they begin to recognize these behaviors and can name it for what it is. For those of you who heard my homily on yesterday, my homily was one big extended homily on cognitive distortions, right? That's all it was. These are the assumptions that are operating in the story that we just heard today, and I gave an extended homily on cognitive distortions. I never said the words cognitive distortions, but I was teaching my congregation about that particular concept towards healthy living.
But one of the priests asked that very question, with the enormity of this, how can we possibly make a difference? And my answer was, every homily you give, every marriage preparation you do, every confirmation preparation you do, every time a woman comes to confession and confesses that her husband's beating her, we'll have some more in there.
That happens. Or confesses that I'm an abuse survivor.
You can talk this. And people show up for Mass there. We went to Mass in Kigali. It was Mass 2 of that morning, out of about 2,000 people there.
Yeah.
And when they had a healing Mass where we were, and there were over 5,000 people there. People walked 20 miles to come to that Mass. So they've got an audience. We can make a huge difference.
Now, what we're going back to this time is that we're going to work with Catholic Relief Services, and there are 9 dioceses. A diocese is a geographical area for the Catholic Church. Okay, so there are 9 dioceses in Rwanda, and all of the dioceses are sending representatives now to this training to learn about it. My conjecture would be that the next step then is to go into the individual dioceses now that these reps understand it and begin to train in each of the geographical regions.
And our fantasy is to put these people together so they can reinforce each other's learnings.
And then the second group that we're working with, as we understand it, is it's a religious order. So this would be a group of, and we don't even know if they are male or female, but a religious order whose particular charism or their particular religious work is counseling, is doing therapy. So we will be training the people of that order now, specifically how to do therapy with trauma recovery. So it will be a very focused, different kind of constituency.
Sounds like planting a lot of good seeds of hope. It's, a way out. There is a way out.
There is a way out.
The thing that I've heard a couple of different places now is that going off to Africa is a really exciting adventure. And what's very common is people go in and do a one-shot thing. And you get your fix, you had your trip, and you spread good stuff, but you don't go back and bring it on home. You've got to reinforce those learnings so that they can actually use them. I mean, even here when we do a training, if a mental health professional is going to start doing the treatment work that we do, they want to come 2 and 3 times to a training.